Hank Snow, a stone killer who was himself wanted for murder and rape in 3 states, laughed out loud. "Hell, Roof, you couldn't read it if it were in your hands." He was referring to the fact that Rufus Gordon carried a sawed-off 10-gauge shotgun in a holster on his hip instead of a pistol, because he was so nearsighted he couldn't see anyone more than a few feet away from him. "That's a lie, and you know it, Hank," Gordon replied. "I can read as good as you any day." That's not saying much," Blackie Johnson sneered. "Hank never learned to read neither." Pike cleared his throat to get his men's attention. "Well, here's what this poster says, boys." He read aloud. "Wanted, dead or alive, the outlaw and murderer Kirby Smoke Jensen. $10,000 reward. Contact the sheriff at Bury, Idaho Territory." 10,000 greenbacks, boys," Pike continued. "That's nothing to sneeze at." "Hell," Gordon said, counting on his fingers. "That's, exactly how much is that for each of us, Bill?" "That is $1,000 apiece, gentlemen," Bill answered. Hank Snow shifted the chaw of tobacco from one cheek to the other, leaned over and spat a stream of brown juice at a horned toad sitting on a rock watching the men. "That's if none of us gets killed 'fore we collect it," Snow said around the tobacco. "More if a couple of us catch a lead pill." "Hank, the poster's for one man, not a whole gang," Gordon argued. "How's one man gonna stand up to us, the meanest, baddest gents west of the Pecos?" Snow looked at Gordon and spat again, his eyes as black as the beard on his cheeks. "You're forgetting something, Roof," he said in a low voice. 10 grand on one man's head must mean he ain't no pilgrim himself." He turned his gaze to Pike. "What did this hombre do to make himself so valuable, Bill?" "Yeah," Gordon added. "What did the sheriff up there tell you?" "I didn't exactly talk to the sheriff, boys," Pike said. "I didn't want nobody else to know we was after this Jensen feller. I got my information along with this wanted poster from a miner I met in a saloon up in Utah." "Well," Snow said, "we're waiting." This miner said he was in Bury, Idaho Territory, a few years back when some gents named Stratton, Potter, and Richards rode into town with a gang of outlaws. He said there were about 20 or so of them all told. A little later, this Jensen, along with a bunch of old mountain men, surrounded the town and told all the miners and townsfolk to get out of town. They'd come for the gang. "What did the gang do to get Jensen and the mountain men all riled up?" Blackie asked. Pike grinned. "Nothing much. Just killed Jensen's wife and baby boy and stole all the gold he'd spent a year mining." "So Jensen and his gang rode into town and shot up the other feller's gang?" Snow asked. Pike shook his head. "Nope. The old miner said all the folks in town gathered on the ridges overlooking Bury and sat and watched as Jensen rode into town alone to face down the gang." "You mean one man went up against over 20 outlaws by himself?" Gordon asked. Pike nodded. "Yep. The miner says it was like a war down there. And when it was over, Smoke Jensen was the last man standing." "Jesus," Gordon said. "I can see why he's worth $10,000. Pike scowled. "I didn't say it was going to be easy, boys, but $1,000 apiece is more than we made in a year down on the Nueces Strip." "You're forgetting one thing, Bill," Snow said. "How the hell are we going to find one man in these mountains?" Pike grinned and pointed over his shoulder down the ridge. "Easy. That there's Smoke Jensen's ranch, the Sugar Loaf. I hear he's given up his guns and turned into a